The hum of the laundromat's dryers filled the room as Marie-Jeanne folded a stack of laundry, her back aching from hours of scrubbing floors at the restaurant. It was already well past midnight. In a few hours, she'd be back at the diner, pouring coffee and refilling salt shakers for minimum wage. But it wasn't enough. It never was. The bills piled up higher than she could manage, and the fear of eviction loomed over her like a dark cloud. Her phone buzzed, another reminder from the apartment manager. Final notice. You have 48 hours to pay or move out. Marie stared at the screen, feeling the weight of it pressing on her chest. Where will we go? The thought echoed in her head, drowning out everything else. She had nothing left to offer her kids. Lena, Jake, they deserved so much more than the hand she'd been dealt. But with no job prospects, no way to pay off the debts, it was all slipping out of her grasp. She stuffed another bundle of clothes into her bag. Marie's eyes wandered over to the small, crumpled newspaper on the counter. Someone must have left it behind, forgotten, but she saw it, the tiny classified ad in the corner. House for sale, $1. Must see to believe. Marie blinked, almost laughing at the absurdity. $1 house. It had to be a scam, but desperation has a way of making dreamers out of the most practical people. She folded the paper and slipped it into her apron, tucking away a fragile hope she hadn't allowed herself in years. The next morning, after dropping the kids off at school, Marie found herself driving to Maple Street, and sure of what to expect. The house stood at the end of a quiet block, its peeling paint and sagging roof making it look like it had been forgotten by time itself. But something in Marie stirred a strange sense of possibility. As she stood there, looking up at the worn exterior, Lena's voice echoed in her memory. Looks haunted. Ma, Marie smiled softly, her gaze scanning the yard overrun by weeds. It looks like it needs love, she thought, though her heart sank at the reality of what it would cost to fix. But this was her chance, a single dollar. Could it be the answer to the impossible situation she was facing? An elderly man named Mr. Patterson approached her, his cane tapping the sidewalk. You hear about the house? He asked, his voice gravelly from years of hard work. Marie nodded, unable to hide the hope flickering in her eyes. $1. What's wrong with it? She asked, already knowing the answer. Patterson chuckled dryly. It's a fixer-upper, to say the least. It'll take a lot to make it livable, but for someone who doesn't mind a challenge. Marie didn't need to hear more. She had no other choice. We need a home. This is our shot. It was surreal. Less than 2 hours later, Marie stood in City Hall, clutching the keys to the house she just bought for the price of a cup of coffee. Her last $87 spent. But for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself a small breath of relief. This house, broken as it was a new beginning. Or so she thought. Back at the house, as she unlocked the door for the first time, Marie's heart pounded. The damp air, the musty smell, it was more than she had imagined. But it was theirs. For the first time, she could feel the walls, the floors beneath her, and know that it was home. She and her 2 kids would make it work, one room at a time, or so she believed. But the house's secrets had just begun to unravel, and what seemed like an answer to her prayers would soon force Marie to make a choice that would change everything. Before we dive into this amazing story, please like and subscribe to this video, share it with your family, and turn the notification sound on. Thank you. Now, let's proceed. Marie-Jeanne's hands shook as she wiped down the last of the diner's countertops. Her shoulders ached, her feet were sore from standing on the hard tiles for the better part of 12 hours, and her eyes burned from the dim fluorescent lights above. It was nearly 11 p.m., and the diner was empty now, the clink of silverware, and the low murmur of conversations long gone. The only thing left was the grinding hum of the air conditioning and the slow ticking of the clock on the wall. She gathered the dirty plates from the booth by the window, each one heavier than the last. She was too tired to think straight. The thought of her two kids, Lena and Jake, waiting for her at home kept her moving. They'd be asleep by now, but the house they were sharing with the friend was crowded, and it felt like the walls were closing in. The moment she got home, she'd have to be up again in 5 hours for her second shift, just to scrape together enough to pay rent for the next month. As she loaded the dishes into the sink, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, her fingers stiff from the cold water, and read the text. "You've got 3 days to find a new place. Eviction notice is final." Her heart skipped a beat. 3 days. It was official. She was running out of time. Marie blinked hard, but the text didn't disappear. It was all too real. She had no money for a deposit, no family to turn to for help. Carlos, her ex-husband, was of no use. He was somewhere, probably gambling away the last of whatever he managed to pull together, just like he always did. That was the reason they were in this mess in the first place. He left, leaving behind a mountain of debts and an empty promise to their kids that he'd make it up to them one day. Marie bit down on her lip, trying to hold it together. Tears burned in her eyes, but she didn't have the luxury of breaking down. Not now. Not when her kids needed her to be strong. She swallowed the lump in her throat and shoved her phone back in her pocket. She glanced at the clock again, only 15 minutes left on the clock before she could leave. But she had nowhere to go. Her options were exhausted. She'd already maxed out every credit card, borrowed money from anyone who would lend it, and she was still behind on every bill. If she didn't find something soon, the streets would be the only option left. She couldn't bear the thought of her kids growing up in the back seat of a car or crashing on couches. Like so many other families who'd fallen into the same cycle of poverty, her heart raced as she slid her apron off. The fabric, heavy with the weight of everything she had to juggle every day. She had to make something work for them. She walked outside into the cold night air, taking a deep breath as the chill hit her skin. The neon sign of the convenience store across the street flickered as she passed. Her mind drifted back to the text she'd received. 3 days. What would happen to them if she didn't pull something together in time? Could she make it work? She was tired of feeling like she was chasing an impossible dream. As she walked home, her gaze fell on a crumpled newspaper lying on the ground by the door of the convenience store. The headline was barely visible, but something caught her eye. She stopped, bending down to pick it up. House for sale for $1. Cash only. 1247 Maple Street. Marie blinked, reading it again to make sure she wasn't seeing things. $1? Her tired mind struggled to make sense of it. She turned the paper over and skimmed the small print. Cash only, no credit. As dashes. It had to be a scam, right? Who would sell a house for just $1? But as she looked at the address 1247 Maple Street, something clicked. She'd heard rumors about properties like this: abandoned houses, foreclosures, homes left to decay because no one wanted to invest the money to fix them up. But $1? That was something else. Her heart skipped a beat as the absurdity of it all mingled with the flicker of hope. What if it wasn't a scam? What if this could be her chance? A fresh start. A place for her kids to finally have their own room. A safe space to grow up without the constant worry of being displaced again. She wasn't sure if it was the exhaustion or the desperation that made her act without thinking. But before she knew it, the paper was tucked in her pocket. She'd have to check it out. What did she have to lose? The next morning, she found herself standing in front of 1247 Maple Street. The house looked even worse up close, a Victorian shell with peeling paint and broken windows, its once grand wraparound porch sagging under the weight of time. The yard had grown wild, weeds as tall as her waist. It looked abandoned, almost haunted. Her stomach twisted at the sight of it. Her kids, Lena, 12, and Jake, 9, hung back behind her, clutching their backpacks. They were silent, their faces reflecting the same uncertainty Marie felt. "It looks haunted," Lena whispered, clutching Jake's hand. Marie couldn't help but chuckle softly. "I think it needs love, not ghosts," she said, her voice reassuring, even though her heart was pounding in her chest. Could this really be the solution? She wasn't sure, but she had to try. As she stood there, unsure of what to do next, an elderly man shuffled out from the house next door, his cane tapping against the cracked pavement. His eyes were heavy with the weight of years, but there was a softness to his gaze that made Marie feel like she wasn't the only one who had lived through hard times. "You hear about the house?" he asked. Marie nodded. "Is it really just $1?" she asked, barely believing the words as they left her lips. He smiled, but there was no joy in it. "It's been up for sale for years. Taxes unpaid. No heirs. They're just trying to get rid of it. It'll take a lot to fix it, though." He glanced at her, studying her face. "You looking for a fresh start, huh?" Marie nodded slowly, feeling the weight of it all. A fresh start? She had nothing left but hope, and hope was the only thing she could cling to. Marie's breath caught as she stood at the edge of the overgrown yard, staring up at the house. The paint was chipped, peeling in long, sad strips. The once beautiful Victorian architecture had been swallowed by time, leaving behind a decaying shell. The windows were boarded up, each one looking like a set of blind eyes that refused to see the world outside. The porch, sagging under the weight of years and neglect, seemed to groan with each gust of wind, as if protesting the intrusion of anyone foolish enough to set foot on its rotting boards. Her children, Lena, 12, and Jake, 9, stood a few paces behind her, their eyes wide with uncertainty. The house looked like a monument to abandonment. The yard, a jungle of weeds and overgrown grass, had long since swallowed the old stone path that once led to the front door. There were no flower beds, no manicured lawns, just a thick mess of vegetation, twisting and coiling in every direction. "It looks haunted," Lucia whispered, her voice small and hesitant, the words floating through the air like a thick fog. Marie didn't answer at first. She simply took in the sight of the house, her heart beating faster with each passing second. It was worse than she had imagined, but even in its sorry state, she could see the potential, a vision of what it could be: a home, her home, one that didn't come with an eviction notice or a stack of overdue bills. She turned to face her daughter, her face softening with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I think it needs love, not ghosts," she said, trying to reassure Lucia, who clung to her side, looking up at her with wide, uncertain eyes. Lena, ever the skeptic, gave a small snort. "Mom, it's falling apart. Are we really going to live in this?" Marie felt a lump form in her throat, but pushed it down. She didn't have the luxury of second-guessing herself. This was their only option. $1. She forced herself to stand tall and took a deep breath, stepping forward into the yard, brushing past the overgrown weeds that scratched at her legs. "Sometimes things look worse than they are," she said, her voice steady. "This house just needs someone to fix it up, and we'll make it work." Lena crossed her arms, still unconvinced, but said nothing. Jake, as usual, didn't seem to care too much. He picked a few wildflowers from the yard and tucked them behind his ear, his mind somewhere far away from the dilapidated house in front of him. As they approached the front porch, the sound of creaking wood made Marie pause. The house seemed to groan in protest at every step they took, as if it knew they were strangers, unwelcome visitors intruding on its long solitude. Her gaze swept over the yard, taking in the rusted remains of an old swing set that had long since lost its paint, and a crumbling stone fence that seemed ready to collapse with a single touch. "Mom, are you sure we're doing the right thing?" Lena asked, her voice soft but heavy with doubt. Marie knelt down, pulling her daughter close. "I know it looks bad right now, but we're going to make it work. We'll fix it together. We'll build a new life here, a fresh start, for all of us." Lena didn't respond, but the tightness in her shoulders eased a little. Marie stood up and glanced around, her eyes landing on the neighboring house. An elderly man stood on his porch, watching them with a keen eye. He was tall but hunched, a cane held in one hand, and a sad sort of resignation in his expression. "Need some help there?" the man called, his voice raspy but not unfriendly. Marie smiled, her heart pounding with nerves. "Oh no, we're just looking around." The man squinted at her, his gaze sharp despite his age. "You're not the first to come by and take a look. You're probably the only one who hasn't run away yet." Marie hesitated but approached, holding her hand out. "I'm Marie. This is Lena and Jake." The man studied her hand for a moment before shaking it. "William Patterson," he said, letting go quickly. "I live next door." He glanced at the house, then back at Marie. "You're brave. I'll give you that. Most folks see this place and turn tail." Marie nodded, her heart sinking a little. Brave wasn't exactly how she felt, but it was the only word she could hold on to. "I'm hoping I can make it work," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. William grunted. "Well, not going to lie to you. It's a mess. Hasn't been taken care of in years. The old owner, well, he's gone now. No heirs left, taxes unpaid, and the city's been trying to sell it for a while." "I'm guessing you saw the ad?" Marie nodded. "Yes, I saw it in the paper. $1. Seems too good to be true." William laughed, a sound that was more bitter than amused. "It's not the price that's the problem. It's the rest of it. The foundation's solid, built on bedrock. That's the only good part about it. The roof leaks, the plumbing's shot, and the electrical, it's ancient. You'd be better off starting from scratch." He looked her over, his eyes assessing. "And the basement? Floods every spring." "Good luck with that." Marie let his words sink in. She wasn't naive. She knew exactly what kind of work it would take. But she couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when this was their only shot. "I appreciate you letting me know," Marie said, her voice steady despite the weight of the truth. "But I'm determined. This is it. We're making this work." William's expression softened, and he gave a small nod. "You've got guts. I'll give you that. City Hall's just down the block. If you're serious, I can help you with the paperwork. But don't say I didn't warn you." Marie smiled, the weight of his warning heavy, but not discouraging. "Thank you. I think we'll be fine." He gave a knowing look, then turned and hobbled back to his house, leaving Marie to contemplate the decision that had already been made. This was it. No turning back. She turned to Lena and Jake, who had been silent through the exchange. "You two ready?" she asked, her voice more hopeful now. Lena shrugged but nodded. Jake grinned and took off running to explore the yard, his small feet kicking up dust as he ventured deeper into the overgrown grass. Marie watched him for a moment, then looked up at the house again. She didn't know how, but somehow, she was going to make this work. Marie stood outside City Hall, the weight of the small, crumpled envelope in her hands feeling heavier than it should. Inside was the deed to 1247 Maple Street, her new home. Or at least, it would be once she could figure out how to make it livable. She glanced down at her children, who stood next to her on the cracked sidewalk, their faces a mix of skepticism and hesitant hope. Lena, her eldest, crossed her arms, her eyes scanning the building behind them. "I don't know, Mom," she said, her voice quiet but unsure. "It's really far out here, and the house is, well, it's really bad. How are we supposed to fix it up?" Marie smiled, trying to keep her nerves hidden. She didn't have all the answers, but she had something more valuable: the determination to make it work. "I know that's not much now, but we'll make it ours. One step at a time, okay?" Jake, her younger son, tugged at her sleeve, his eyes wide with excitement. "Are we really going to live here, Mom? Even with all the broken windows?" Marie knelt down to his level, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "Yes, baby. This is our new beginning. I promise you, this house will be home. It just needs a little love." The uncertainty in their eyes didn't vanish, but they nodded, accepting her words as they always had. They trusted her, and that was enough for now. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she stuffed the deed and the keys into her pocket. The surreal feeling of having actually gone through with it was still sinking in. A house for $1. How was that even possible? With Mr. Patterson's help, she'd filled out the paperwork in City Hall, signed her name at least 3 times on various dusty forms, and handed over her last $87 to cover the fees. The city clerk had smirked as she handed over the keys, making a comment about good luck with the mansion, but for Marie, it wasn't about the price tag. It was about survival. For the first time in months, she had a roof over her head that wasn't borrowed or temporary. Now, the real work begins, she thought, her heart racing as they made their way back to the house. She had no illusions about how difficult it would be to turn 1247 Maple Street into a home. The roof leaked, the plumbing was outdated, and the whole place had an oppressive, musty smell. But the potential was there, tucked beneath the layers of neglect. The kids would have their own rooms. There would be space for them to grow, and for Marie to finally breathe. When they reached the house, Marie unlocked the front door with a shaky hand, the key cold in her palm. She stepped inside first, holding the door open for the kids. The air inside was stale, the smell of mildew and old wood mixing with the faint scent of dampness from the rain earlier that day. Lena let out a low whistle. "It really is like a haunted house," she said, her voice echoing in the empty room. Marie laughed softly, though the sound didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's just a little neglected," she said, trying to sound optimistic. "But we'll fix it up, won't we? Just like we talked about." Jake kicked at the floor, his voice unsure. "It's dark in here, and cold." The chill in the air was palpable, especially in the shadows that clung to the corners of the room. There was no electricity, no heat. Only the dim light filtering through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. The silence of the house was unsettling. It felt like the walls were watching them, waiting for them to decide if they would stay or leave. But there was no turning back. Marie took a deep breath and motioned for the kids to follow her. "Let's explore. We'll find a place to settle in for the night." The house creaked under their footsteps, as if protesting the intrusion. Dust rose in the air, swirling with every movement. Marie led them through the rooms, showing them the kitchen with its rusted sink and outdated stove, the living room with its faded wallpaper and sagging floors. The stairs groaned as they made their way up to the second floor. where the bedrooms were small, cramped, and barely able to hold a bed, let alone the furniture they would need. The rooms felt cold, almost abandoned, the remnants of past lives still visible in the cracked ceilings and peeling paint. Lena, her arms still crossed, glanced around. I mean, it's big, but it's kind of creepy, don't you think? Marie tried to sound reassuring. It's just old, sweetie. This place has a lot of character. We'll make it warm. It's just going to take some time. Jake, however, was already tugging at his backpack, clearly eager to find a corner of the house where he could feel comfortable. Can we pick out our rooms? He asked, his voice a little more excited now that they were inside. Marie nodded, a small smile pulling at the corner of her lips. Yes, of course. You can each choose your room. It's yours to make whatever you want of it. She paused, looking out the cracked window into the overgrown yard. The promise she had made to her children still echoed in her mind. This is our new beginning. But as the silence settled around them, the reality of it all hit her. She didn't know where to start. She didn't have enough money to fix the roof, the plumbing, or the electrical work. And without those things, they couldn't even sleep here comfortably. Marie closed her eyes for a moment, exhaling slowly. Doubt crept in, threatening to swallow her whole. She had made promises to her children, promises she couldn't break. She had to make this work, even if it felt impossible. She turned to face her children, forcing a confident smile. We're going to be okay. This is our home now, and no matter how hard it gets, we'll make it work. Together. Lena, still skeptical, nodded slowly, her arms uncrossing just a little. Jake, ever the optimist, grinned at her. We'll make it fun, right, Mom? Like a big adventure. Marie chuckled, the sound a little hollow in the empty house. That's the spirit, Jake. But as she looked around at the cold, empty rooms, she knew the hard work had only just begun. The house was theirs, but the road to making it a home would be longer than she could imagine. For now, though, they would settle in for the night, the only warmth coming from the promise of a better future. A future that, for the first time in months, felt possible. The first night in the house was a test of Marie's resolve. The floors creaked underfoot, the walls groaned with every gust of wind, and the faint smell of dampness lingered in the air. The house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to give. They had no electricity, no heat, and the only running water came from the ancient pipes that had seen better days if they ever had seen them at all. Marie had set up sleeping bags in the living room, a makeshift nest for her children, surrounded by the cold, cracked walls of the house. Lena curled up tightly on one side, her face turned toward the flickering light of the small lantern Marie had bought with her last $20. Jake, ever the optimist, was trying to make the best of the situation. He'd spread out in his sleeping bag, pretending the floor wasn't as hard as stone, and whispered stories to Lucia, who lay awake beside him, her wide eyes reflecting the same uncertainty that Marie had felt when they first walked through the door. Marie sat in the corner, the light from the lantern casting soft shadows across her tired face. The night seemed endless. She kept telling herself it was temporary, just a bump in the road, just another part of the journey. She had to keep believing that otherwise, the weight of it all would crush her. Outside, the rain began to pour down in sheets, drumming against the roof with an unsettling rhythm. The noise was deafening, and Marie's thoughts turned to the roof she'd yet to fix. She knew it was bad, but she hadn't expected it to leak this soon. As the rain picked up, she heard it a trickle, then a steady stream of water, creeping across the living room floor. She jumped up, grabbing whatever bowls and pots she could find, placing them underneath the leaks. The house had already started to feel like a sinking ship, by the time the kids had fallen asleep. The floor was dotted with puddles, and Marie had used every towel in the house to absorb the water. The rain showed no sign of stopping. Neither did the growing list of repairs that loomed over her. When the morning light finally broke through the dirty windows, it did little to dispel the sense of dread that had settled in overnight. The roof was still leaking, and the puddles from the night before had spread into the basement, filling the room with cold, stagnant water. The basement, already a mess of old furniture and forgotten belongings, was now a swamp of mildew and soaked drywall. Marie stood at the top of the stairs, staring down into the darkness of the basement. The faint smell of mold and wet earth reached her before anything else, sending a shiver down her spine. She had known the house would be a project, but the reality of the situation hit her like a punch in the gut. There was no way she could fix this on her own. She needed more than just a hammer and nails. She needed contractors, materials, and money she didn't have. As her eyes scanned the basement, she realized it would take thousands of dollars to repair the damage, more than she could hope to save in months of cleaning offices and working shifts at the diner. She climbed back up the stairs, feeling the weight of the house pressing down on her chest. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. How had she let herself believe this was the fresh start they so desperately needed? When the kids woke up, the house felt like a prison. They were tired and cold, and the promise of a new life seemed to vanish with each passing minute. Lena, usually so calm, was the first to voice what they were all thinking. "Mom, how are we going to fix all of this?" she asked, her voice quiet but heavy with doubt. She sat on the couch, picking at a piece of lint on her sleeve. Marie smiled, though the gesture felt forced. "One thing at a time, sweetie. We'll fix what we can today, and then we'll fix more tomorrow." But she knew, deep down, that it wasn't enough. The house was falling apart faster than she could manage. And every day that passed, it felt more and more like the fresh start she had hoped for was slipping through her fingers. Still, she couldn't give up. She wouldn't. Over the next few days, Marie worked non-stop. During the day, she focused on patching the leaks in the roof with what she could afford. She used some old tarps and sheets she found in the basement, tying them to the rafters in a desperate attempt to stop the water from pouring in. It was a temporary fix at best, but it was all she could do. In the evenings, after she'd gotten the kids settled, she headed out to clean offices. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, even if just barely. Every penny she earned went into making the house a little more habitable. She bought a space heater to keep them warm at night, and managed to save enough for some basic plumbing supplies. But the work never stopped. Each new problem seemed to bring two more. The old plumbing leaked every time they used the sink. The stove barely worked, and the fridge, when it worked at all, sounded like it was about to give up on them. The house felt like it was fighting back, like it didn't want to be fixed, like it was determined to swallow them whole. But through it all, Marie held on. It wasn't much, but it was something, and she kept telling herself it would be enough. Each night, after a long day of repairs and cleaning, Marie would curl up with her kids, exhausted but hopeful. They were still together, and no matter how bad things got, they were making it work, one day at a time. But as she lay in the darkness, listening to the rain beat against the roof, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she was running out of time. This house, this impossible dream, was slipping further and further away from her grasp. Marie wiped her brow, the sweat mixing with the dust that seemed to follow her every move in the house. The basement was no better than the rest of the house, its cold, damp air choking her with every breath. Every corner was dark and foreboding, and the water from the roof leaks had created a persistent dampness that seemed to linger in the walls. The basement, once an afterthought, was now her next big project. But today, something was different. She had been trying to patch up the cracks in the basement walls for days, but something kept nagging at her. One of the walls, the farthest corner, just didn't look right. It was too smooth, almost too new compared to the rest of the room. The stone was too clean, the mortar too fresh. Marie paused, staring at it for a long moment. Her fingers brushed against the wall, and she felt the slight give beneath the surface, as if the wall was hiding something. There was a part of her that told her she should leave it alone. It was just another old wall in a house full of problems. But another part of her, the part that had gotten her this far, urged her to keep going. She grabbed the crowbar from her toolbox, the metal feeling heavy in her hands as she stood before the wall. What could it hurt? With a deep breath, she wedged the crowbar between the stones and pried gently at first, testing the give. The wall creaked, but nothing moved. She pressed harder, pulling the crowbar until a loud crack echoed through the basement. The mortar split with an almost unnatural ease, and the wall shifted just enough to expose a faint gap. Her heart raced as she widened the space, the crowbar scraping against the stone with an awful noise that made her wince. As she pulled the final piece of the wall away, dust filled the air, and a musty odor rolled out from the hidden space. Marie's hands trembled, both from the effort and the growing sense of unease. There, behind the wall, was a small room no bigger than a closet, but deep enough to make her pulse quicken. She hesitated for only a moment, her curiosity outweighing her fear. She dropped the crowbar and stepped inside, her flashlight beam dancing across the small, hidden space. Her first instinct was to step back. The air in the room felt different, stale and thick with the scent of old decay. As her eyes adjusted, she could make out the details. Metal boxes, stacked haphazardly from floor to ceiling, most of them rusted, their edges worn from years of neglect. They looked like old ammunition crates, the kind soldiers used during wartime. She crouched down to get a closer look, her breath shallow. What were these doing here? Her hands shook as she reached for one of the boxes, pulling it open with the squeal of rusted hinges. Inside was something she hadn't expected: old, faded documents, and a few pieces of broken, tarnished metal. She shuffled through the box, but there was no gold, no riches, nothing that seemed out of the ordinary for an abandoned house. But as she moved to the next box, her breath hitched in her throat. The box was heavier, the metal more solid than the others. She pried it open, her hands trembling, and then, as the lid came free, she froze. Gold, raw gold nuggets, bars, and flakes spilled out onto the floor like something from a treasure chest. She could barely believe her eyes. The light from her flashlight caught the edges of the gold, and it gleamed in the dimness of the room, a stark contrast to the dark and dilapidated surroundings. It was worth more than she had ever seen in her entire life, more than her wildest dreams could have imagined. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The house, the repairs, the endless bills, all of it faded away in the presence of this discovery. Marie's heart pounded in her chest as she kneeled down, her hands instinctively reaching for the gold. It was heavy, cold, and sharp against her fingertips. She pulled a handful of the larger bars closer, the weight of them too much for her mind to process. But as her fingers brushed against another box, she noticed something else. At the back of the room, hidden beneath the stacks of crates, there was something else, something darker. A small, decaying bundle of fabric caught her eye. It had been hidden, almost deliberately, beneath the gold-laden crates. Her throat tightened as she approached it cautiously, her hands shaking. She reached for it, pulling the tattered cloth away to reveal what lay underneath, the remains of a human body. Marie stumbled back, her heart pounding in her chest as the sickening realization set in. The body was skeletal, its clothing rotted beyond recognition. The faintest remnants of a wallet leather, decayed and crumbling, were visible beside it. But it was the handcuffs that stopped her cold. They were old, rusted, but unmistakable, shackled to the remains. Marie felt the world around her shift, like the floor had suddenly dropped away beneath her. The gold, the treasure she had hoped could save them, now felt like something far darker. She pulled her hands away from the remains, her breath shallow and frantic. What had she uncovered? Her mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. Who had hidden these boxes, and why? Who had left the body, shackled and forgotten, in the basement? It was a question she couldn't answer, one that she wasn't sure she wanted to. But as her eyes fell back on the gold, the weight of it literally and figuratively pressed down on her. This was not just a lucky find. This was a grave secret, buried for a reason, tied to something far bigger than a woman just trying to make a life for her kids. Marie's breath hitched. She had to make a decision. Would she keep the gold and risk everything? Or would she turn it in and face the uncertainty that came with unearthing something so dangerous? The promise of a better life still shimmered in the gold's glow, but with it came the shadow of something sinister. And as much as she wanted to walk away, to pretend she had never seen it, she knew she couldn't. She was already in too deep. The answer would come. But for now, the weight of her discovery hung heavy in the air, filling the room with questions and uncertainty. Marie sat alone in the dim light of the basement, the gold still scattered across the floor like treasure, gleaming in the quiet, musty air. Her mind was a whirlwind, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never imagined such a discovery. Never in her worst nightmares had she thought she'd stumble upon something so valuable, yet so sinister. The gold felt like a weight, heavier than any of the problems she'd been running from since she'd walked into this house. Her fingers trembled as she picked up one of the gold bars, feeling its weight in her hand. This could change everything. The thought echoed through her mind, but it was followed by a sickening realization. What was she really holding? The remains of the body behind the wall, the handcuffs, the decaying wallet. It all pointed to something far darker than a simple treasure. The old adage echoed in her mind, nothing comes without a cost. And this was costing her everything. With the gold still in her hands, Marie had made a decision. She needed answers, but the only way to get them was to turn to someone who could help, someone who could make sense of this mess. She couldn't carry this alone. That's when she made the call. It didn't take long for Detective Anna Hayes to return her message. Marie had researched her before dialing, her name popping up again and again in connection to the notorious Vincent Delgado gang and a string of robberies in the 1980s. Hayes had been investigating Delgado and his crew for years. She was, by all accounts, one of the most determined and relentless investigators the city had ever seen. But Marie didn't know if that was a blessing or a curse. Af the phone rang and rang. Marie's mind raced. What would she even say? How could she explain what she'd found? A woman calling about gold hidden in her basement, remnants of a robbery, and a body. How was that even possible? The questions seemed endless, and every answer felt like it would drag her deeper into something far more dangerous than a dilapidated house. When the phone finally clicked, a cool voice greeted her. Detective Hayes. Marie's throat tightened. She hadn't expected to actually get through to her. Yes, Detective Hayes. My name is Marie Johnson. I think I've found something that might be connected to the Delgado case. There was a pause on the other end, the sound of papers shifting before Anna responded. I'm listening. Marie took a deep breath. I've recently moved into a house on Maple Street. It's in terrible condition, but while I've been working to fix it up, I discovered something strange. There's a small room hidden behind the basement wall, and inside, I found gold. But I also found a body. A long silence followed. Marie's heartbeat drummed in her ears, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a cloud she couldn't shake. Gold? And a body? Detective Hayes's voice was even controlled. Where exactly did you find this? Marie told her everything. The gold, the body, the handcuffs, the crumbling wallet. She recounted every detail, from the moment she had first pried the wall open, to the horrifying discovery of the remains. When she finished, the silence on the other end of the line felt heavier than ever. Anna Hayes finally spoke. I need to come see this for myself. Marie's breath caught. She knew what that meant. Do you think it's connected to Delgado? Anna's voice was sharp, her tone now carrying a personal edge. It's not just connected, it's the same case. I've been investigating Delgado for years. His crew was notorious for stealing gold in the 1980s. Thomas Morrison, the man who owned that house before you, was involved. He was one of the ringleaders, but no one ever found the loot. It's been gone for decades. Marie froze, the blood draining from her face. Thomas Morrison? He was the previous owner? Yes, Hayes confirmed. Morrison was the one who helped Delgado move the stolen gold. But after the robbery, he disappeared. No one knows where he went. He left the house abandoned for years, and the city has been trying to get rid of it since. Marie's mind reeled. Morrison was involved with Delgado? The man whose house she had just bought was part of the infamous gang. Anna continued, her voice softer now. Morrison wasn't just a criminal. He was a victim too. Delgado had his hands in everything. He was ruthless, and anyone who crossed him ended up paying the price. I don't know what happened to Morrison, but this could be the break I've been waiting for. Marie swallowed hard. So, what does that mean for me? What do I do now? You need to let me come investigate, Anna said firmly. This isn't just about you anymore, Marie. It's about solving an old crime and bringing justice to the people who were affected by it. Marie's heart raced. Justice. She thought of her children upstairs, unaware of the danger lurking just below them. If she turned the gold over, if she helped Anna investigate, it could cost her everything. Her new life, her fresh start, all of it. But keeping the gold, the temptation to hold on to it, to change her family's future in an instant, gnawed at her. It was more than she had ever dreamed of. It was the chance she had been hoping for, an escape from the crushing weight of debt and struggle. But could she really keep it, knowing it was tied to a crime? Knowing it had been hidden for a reason? Marie's voice trembled as she spoke again. What do I do, detective? If I keep it, I could change everything for my family. But if I give it up, everything could fall apart. Anna was silent for a moment. You're in a tough spot, Marie, but what you have is evidence, not treasure. Turning it in is the right thing to do. Keeping it could ruin your life and your children's future. Marie's thoughts were a whirlpool, spinning faster and faster until everything was dizzying. She had wanted a new life, a fresh start, but it was clear now this house, this gold, was far from an easy solution. With Anna Hayes coming to investigate, Marie had no choice but to face the reality of what she had uncovered. And in that moment, she realized the decision she had to make wasn't just about the gold, it was about who she was willing to become, and what kind of future she wanted to build for her children. The past was rising up to meet her, and the choice between a clean slate and the shadow of crime had never been clearer. Marie sat on the edge of the kitchen table, staring at the small, crumpled piece of paper in her hand, the note from Detective Anna Hayes, promising to meet her later that day. The words on the page blurred together as her mind raced, trying to process the weight of the decision she had to make. Everything had changed. The discovery of the gold had seemed like the answer to all her prayers. But now, with Detective Hayes involved and the dark history of the Delgado gang slowly unraveling before her eyes, Marie began to see the truth. This was no simple stroke of luck. She wasn't holding treasure. She was holding the ghosts of a past she wasn't prepared to face. Her fingers trembled as she placed the note on the table. The weight of her discovery was suffocating. Every time she thought she could breathe, something new came to light. Something that pulled her deeper into a web of lies and crimes she hadn't signed up for. The past has a way of coming back, she thought bitterly. Marie rose from the table, pacing the small kitchen. The house was still cold, and the creaks of the floorboards were more unnerving than comforting. It was hard to even think clearly with everything happening so fast. Her children Lena and Jake were upstairs, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. She'd promised them that this house, this broken, haunted shell, would be their home, a safe haven. But now, she could feel herself slipping, caught between two worlds, one where she could protect her family with the gold she'd found, and another where doing the right thing meant turning it over to the authorities and risking everything. Detective Hayes had been clear. Help us solve this case, Marie. Cooperate, and you and your family will be safe. You can't hide forever. But the word safe felt hollow. It wasn't just about the police investigation anymore. It was about what Marie was willing to sacrifice. If she turned the gold in, what would she have left? She had no savings, no backup plan. All she had was the promise of a new life, a promise she couldn't keep unless she took a huge risk. She closed her eyes, leaning against the counter. What if she was making the wrong choice? Turning in the gold would mean facing a long, painful road to recovery. A road that might not end with her and her kids in a safer, better place. A road that could leave her with nothing. But if she kept it, if she held on to the gold, knowing its bloody past, she could finally give Lena and Jake the life they deserved. They could live in peace. They could finally escape the endless cycle of debt, eviction notices, and hopelessness. The dilemma felt suffocating, each option worse than the other. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Marie's heart skipped in her chest, and for a moment, she thought it was Detective Hayes come to take her statement, to push her further into a corner. But when she opened the door, it wasn't the detective. It was Carlos, her ex-husband. His face was haggard, the lines of stress and sleepless nights more visible than ever. He stood there, hands in his pockets, his eyes darting nervously, as if he wasn't sure whether to be there at all. "Marie," he said, voice low, almost apologetic. I know it's been a while, but I've been thinking." Marie stiffened. "Carlos, what are you doing here?" He shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as if worried someone might overhear. "Look, I know I've messed up. I know I've been a failure. But we need to talk about the gold." Marie froze, her mind spinning. "What about the gold?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Carlos stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Listen, Marie. You know as well as I do that we need money. I've got debts, bad ones. He stopped himself, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I can't get out of this mess without it. You don't know what it's like, the pressure, the guys I owe." Her heart dropped. "You want me to give you the gold?" It wasn't a question. Carlos's expression shifted, desperation creeping into his voice. "I'm not asking you to keep it forever, just long enough to clear my debts. I can't do this without you, Marie." You've always been the smart one. We can get back on track, fix everything, if you just help me. We'll pay it all off." Marie's blood ran cold. The offer was tempting, but the price was too high. She had just uncovered a dangerous, tangled mess that had already cost someone their life. And now, Carlos, of all people, was asking her to use it to dig herself even deeper into the hole they'd both tried to escape from. "No, Carlos," she said firmly, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'm not using that gold for your debts. I can't." Carlos's face twisted in frustration. "You don't get it, do you? You don't have a choice. We're drowning here, and this could save us. You've been working yourself to the bone, and this is the only shot we've got. You think I want to beg for your help? You think I want to be here like this? But I'm not stupid. I know what that gold is worth." Marie's throat tightened, and for a split second, she almost gave in. She could see the future that Carlos was painting, a future where they were finally free from financial ruin, where her kids didn't have to grow up on scraps. It was tempting, more tempting than anything she had ever been offered. But deep down, she knew that this was a slippery slope. Taking that gold would only drag her further into something darker, something that might destroy her family for good. "I'm sorry, Carlos," she said, voice thick with emotion. "This isn't the way out. Not for me. Not for the kids." Carlos's eyes darkened. "Fine," he spat, turning away. "You'll regret this. We both will." Marie watched him walk away, his figure growing smaller as he disappeared down the street. She stood there, heart pounding in her chest, as a chill ran through her. She had made her decision, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like walking a tightrope. What if I was wrong? Her thoughts turned back to the gold, to Detective Hayes, and the promise of a future without fear. But as Marie closed the door behind her, she knew that the road ahead was more uncertain than ever, and the decision she had made could haunt her for the rest of her life. The days following Carlos's visit were a blur for Marie. The tension in the house grew with each passing hour. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the old windows, it all felt like the weight of her decision was bearing down on her, threatening to crush her under its pressure. She couldn't sleep, couldn't think. The gold was a constant presence in her mind, gleaming and heavy, sitting there like an impossible choice she couldn't escape. Every time she closed her eyes, she could feel the weight of it in her hands. It could change everything. It could set us free, but the thought of being caught, of being dragged into a criminal investigation, paralyzed her. The FBI was already involved. Detective Hayes had made that clear. She had given Marie a final ultimatum: turn it in and cooperate, or face the consequences. Her stomach churned. Marie's mind swirled with the impossible question: could she keep the gold and live with the consequences? Or would she hand it over and lose everything she had fought for, everything she had promised her children? Marie sat in the living room, staring at the worn walls around her. It felt like the house was closing in, the air thick with the weight of the decision. She hadn't spoken to her kids about what had happened, what they had found, but she could feel the tension in the air, in their eyes, every time they looked at her. Lena had been quiet, too quiet, and Jake had started asking more questions about their future, about the house, about what would happen next. They didn't know the half of it. They didn't know that the house they had moved into, the home Marie had promised them would be their fresh start, was built on secrets far darker than they could imagine. The knock at the door startled her, pulling her out of her thoughts. She opened it, half expecting it to be Carlos again, but instead, it was Detective Hayes, her expression as unreadable as ever. "Marie," Hayes said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." Marie stepped back, her breath catching in her throat. She had known this moment was coming. She had known the day would come when Hayes would push her, would force her to make the final choice. And now, here it was, staring her down like a looming mountain. "Come in," Marie said, her voice barely above a whisper. They sat at the kitchen table, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Hayes watched her, her gaze sharp and calculating. It was clear that she wasn't here for small talk. She was here for answers. "You found it," Hayes said finally, her voice low. "The gold." "The gold from the Delgado robbery," Marie nodded, feeling the weight of her actions pressing in on her. She hadn't expected to feel guilty. She'd expected relief, excitement, maybe even a sense of triumph. But what she felt now, sitting across from this investigator who had spent years chasing down criminals like Delgado, was something else. Fear, regret, shame. Hayes leaned forward, her eyes softening just a fraction. "Marie, I'm not here to make this harder for you. I'm giving you a chance to do the right thing. You cooperate, and I'll make sure you and your family are safe. No one has to know about this. You'll get immunity." Marie swallowed hard, her throat dry. Immunity. The word hung in the air, thick with implications. She wanted to believe that the promise of safety could ease her fears, but it only made her more anxious. She couldn't shake the thought of what would happen if she turned the gold in. What would she have left? Nothing. The kids would never forgive her. And what if they didn't get immunity? What if it wasn't enough to keep them safe? She would be taking a huge risk. A risk that could change the course of their lives forever. "Why do you want to help me?" Marie asked quietly, her voice trembling. "I don't understand. You've been hunting Delgado for years. Why would you give me immunity?" Hayes exhaled slowly. "Because I know what it's like to be caught in the middle. I know what it's like to be a victim. My uncle was one of Delgado's victims during that robbery. He didn't survive. No one's ever been held accountable for it. The case has haunted me my whole career." Marie froze. The revelation hit her harder than she'd expected. Hayes wasn't just an investigator. She had personal stakes in this case. Her uncle had died at the hands of the very people Marie was now entangled with. "Detective, I didn't know," Marie said, her voice thick with guilt. "I didn't know it was this bad. I didn't know the history behind it." Hayes nodded, her eyes hardening with resolve. "That's why I'm giving you this chance. I can't promise you an easy road, Marie, but if you turn over the gold, I can guarantee your safety, your children's safety." But the fear that had gripped Marie's heart still lingered. The gold was her lifeline. If she turned it in, she would lose everything. But if she kept it, if she tried to bury the truth, she was taking a massive risk. She would be running from the consequences forever. And no matter how much she wanted to believe otherwise, she knew that it would catch up to her. Her mind raced as she stared at the gold in her mind's eye, the weight of it, the glimmer of opportunity. "I want to do the right thing," Marie said, her voice breaking. "But I don't know how to let go of the one thing that could change everything for us." For a long moment, Detective Hayes said nothing. She simply watched Marie, her expression softening as she understood the depth of the struggle. Finally, Hayes spoke. "Marie, you have to make the decision. No matter what you choose, your life will never be the same. But the question is, what kind of life do you want for your children? What kind of future do you want to build?" Marie looked at Hayes, then down at her hands, which were trembling as she clasped them together. Her mind was clear now, though the weight of the choice remained heavy. "I'll turn it in," Marie said finally, the words catching in her throat. "I'll turn in the gold. I can't risk my kid's future. I have to do the right thing." Hayes nodded, a faint trace of relief in her eyes. "Thank you, Marie. You're making the right choice." As Marie stood, her heart felt like it was breaking. But she knew this was the only way forward. No more running, no more hiding. It was time to face the consequences. And as she looked into Hayes's eyes, Marie knew this decision, this sacrifice, would change everything. But it was the only chance she had to protect the people she loved. The house was quiet now, the air heavy with the smell of fresh paint and old wood. It was a far cry from the chaos that had once consumed the space. The FBI had taken control of the gold, and just like that, the thing that had threatened to tear their lives apart was now in someone else's hands. The agents came and went, their voices low and professional, as they gathered every bit of evidence from the basement: the gold, the documents, the remains of a forgotten past. Marie had watched them carefully, standing at the doorway as they worked, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she had made the right choice. The right choice, she repeated in her mind, but it didn't make the feeling of loss any easier to bear. The house still felt cold, the walls seeming to echo with memories of decisions made and paths taken. Lena and Jake were adjusting too. They hadn't fully understood what had happened, but they had sensed the shift in the air, the weight that had lifted, but also the uncertainty of what came next. Their mother had made the decision to turn over the gold, and now was moving forward in a way it hadn't before. But things would never be the same. Marie had spent the last few weeks cleaning up the mess left behind, not just the physical mess in the house, but the emotional one she had carried. As the days passed, the uncertainty that had once gripped her heart began to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. The FBI's investigation into the Delgado gang continued, slowly unraveling the mysteries of the past and bringing closure to long unsolved crimes. But for Marie, the real work had just begun. She had returned to a simpler life, a life that didn't rely on gold or stolen treasures. There was no windfall waiting for her, no sudden escape from the struggles she had fought against for so long. Instead, there was the quiet rhythm of everyday life, fixing what needed to be fixed, finding work where she could, and ensuring that her children had everything they needed. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and it was enough. One evening, as she sat at the kitchen table, Lena and Jake doing their homework nearby, Marie looked around the house she had fought for, the house she had promised her children would be their home. It wasn't perfect. There were still cracks in the walls, and the roof leaked every now and then. But it was warm, and it was theirs. There were no more secrets hidden in the basement, no more ghosts from the past threatening to pull them under. Marie had reconciled with her actions, and in doing so, she had found something far more valuable than gold. She had found her own strength, her own ability to stand tall. Even when the world seemed to be falling apart around her, she wasn't perfect. She hadn't been the perfect mother, or the perfect wife, or the perfect person. But in this moment, as she looked at the two faces she loved more than anything in the world, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for what she had. Lena looked up from her homework, sensing her mother's gaze. "Mom, what's wrong?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. Marie smiled softly, pushing the hair out of her face. "Nothing's wrong, sweetie. Everything's right. We're together, and that's all that matters." Lena smiled back, the lines of worry easing from her face. Jake, too, looked up, his small grin infectious, as he finished his math problems. They were growing up, and though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, Marie knew they would face it together. Later that night, after the kids had gone to bed, Marie sat by the window, watching the quiet street outside. The house, now fully hers, felt more like home than it ever had before. She had worked so hard for this moment, for the peace she now felt. And as the stars twinkled outside, a feeling of hope settled over her. It wasn't the kind of hope that came from quick fixes or miracles. It was the kind of hope that grew from hard work, from facing down your demons, and from choosing the right thing, even when it was the hardest choice. She had made mistakes, but she had also learned from them. The gold had come with its own kind of temptation, but in the end, Marie had chosen a future built on honesty and integrity, something she could be proud of. The past, with all its darkness and secrets, was finally behind her. In the morning, she would continue her work, just as she had every day since they'd moved in. The house still needed a lot of work, and the bills were still a constant reminder of her struggles. But she could handle it. She had already faced the hardest part, the decision to do the right thing, even when it seemed impossible. For the first time in a long time, Marie felt like she was on the right path. She was no longer looking over her shoulder, no longer wondering what would happen if someone found out about the gold. The past was the past, and her future, however uncertain, was waiting for her to shape it. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, and let the quiet settle over her. The future was still uncertain, but now, for the first time in a long while, Marie felt like she could move forward with hope in her heart. The final scene fades with Marie standing at the window, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of the streetlights outside. She was no longer chasing a dream built on the lies of the past. Instead, she was building a future based on the strength of her family, the love that anchored her, and the lessons she had learned through her difficult journey. And with that, Marie Johns, the woman who had been tested by life's harshest realities, knew one thing for sure. This was her new beginning.